As Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Today, awareness is our education, and together it becomes our strongest weapon against drug abuse. A healthy nation begins with healthy minds, and healthy minds begins with informed choices. Good evening, everyone. With this meaningful thought, I extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Kumar Askand Pandey, sir, Associate Professor at Dr. Manohar Lohiya, National Law University, Lucknow. Professor Dr. Alok Kumar Yadav, sir, Faculty in Charge, Pro Bono Club. Dr. Sudhir Verma, sir, Assistant Faculty in Charge, Pro Bono Club. Professor Dr. Abhishek Tiwari, sir, Chairperson, Legal Aid Center. Dr. Bhavna, ma'am, Co-Chairperson, Legal Aid Center. Dr. Anjali, ma'am, Co-Chairperson, Legal Aid Center, and all participants joining us today. I, Vishesh, Associate of Pro Bono Club, Faculty of Law, warmly welcome you all here, and I'll be moderating to today's event organized by Pro Bono Club in the collaboration with the Legal Aid Center, Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow. Today, we have gathered here on the occasion of International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, a day that reminds of a serious global concern and the need for collective awareness and responsibility. The theme of today's webinar is Drug Awareness and Wellness Navigation Scheme 2025. Through this webinar, we aim to understand substance abuse not just as a social issue, but also from a legal, psychological, and health perspective, along with the ways to prevent and address it effectively. Before we begin, just a few quick instructions. I request all the participants to keep their microphone muted throughout the session unless invited to speak. This will help us to maintain smooth proceeding. And also at the end, we will have a dedicated question and answer round where you are welcome to share your queries and ask the questions. Now, let me briefly introduce the two organizing body of today's event, Pro Bono Club. The Pro Bono Club, established at the Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow in 2023, works under the aegis of Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India. It aims to promote and facilitate Nyay Bandhu program in India. It encourages lawyers, law firms, and law students to engage in pro bono work and contribute to the access to justice for marginalized and underprivileged sections of the society. Now, about the Legal Aid Center. Legal Aid Center, Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow, working under the aegis of the District Legal Services Authority, promotes equal access to justice for all, guided by Article 14 and Article 39A of our Indian Constitution. It seeks to create socially responsible citizens, provide free legal services and literacy to marginalized groups, thereby bridging the gap caused by poverty and illiteracy. The center conducts awareness programs on issues like sexual harassment of women at workplace, child safety, cybersecurity, and gender equality through workshops, village visits, jail visits, and Lok Adalat participation, while giving students practical experience in community services. Together, both committee aim to connect legal education with responsibility. Now, to formally begin the session, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Alok Kumar Yadav, sir, Faculty in Charge, Pro Bono Club, to deliver the welcome address. Sir, please.
Thank you, Vishesh. गुड इवनिंग सर। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल सर को प्रणाम सर, जैसा कि हमारे गुरु भी रहे हैं, तो गुड इवनिंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू। इट्स माय great honor and privilege to welcome you all on this today's program on drug abuse awareness. A special and heartfelt welcome goes to our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Kumar Askand Pandey, sir. It is a matter of immense pride and personal joy for me to introduce and welcome him as not only as our distinguished speaker, but also as one of my respected teacher. I have had the privilege of learning under his guidance during my LLM course, and I can personally testify to his dedication, wisdom, and commitment to educating and inspiring young minds. Sir, your presence among us today is truly inspiring. Your vast knowledge, rich experience, and passion for social causes make you the ideal person to address this gathering and to our students. We are grateful that you have taken the time to share your valuable insight with us. I also extend a warm welcome to all the students and Pro Bono member of Pro Bono Club and member of our LAC members, the chairperson of LAC, and all the students. Once again, I welcome you all. Wishes over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your encouraging and inspiring words. Your guidance sets a strong foundation for today's discussion. We will now move to a brief address on the theme of our webinar. For that, I would like to call Kritika Singh, Associate of Pro Bono Club, to briefly explain the basic concept of drug abuse and drug addiction.
Okay, everyone. Today marks the National Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, a day that demands not just our reflection, but our active resolution. It is in the spirit of collective action that we highlight the Dawn Scheme 2025, which stands for Drug Awareness and Wellness Navigation. This movement serves as a crucial blueprint for a drug-free India, shifting our national approach towards a comprehensive framework of early awareness, proactive mental wellness, and structured navigation system for those in need. It recognizes that to protect our nation's future, we must build a shield of awareness that reaches every classroom, every campus, and every household. Let me discuss the theme of today's webinar, the Drug Awareness and Wellness Navigation Scheme 2025, and our collective aspiration for a drug-free India. We must first confront a fundamental truth. We cannot solve a crisis we do not fully understand. To fight drug abuse, a take hold. To build a meaningful foundation for today's discussion, we must draw a distinct medical line between two terms that are frequently interchangeably but are completely different things: drug abuse and drug addiction. Drug abuse is the intentional, improper use of a substance. It is a conscious behavioral choice of taking a drug for purposes other than prescribed or in excessive amount to achieve a certain sensation. At the stage of abuse, a person still retains the voluntary control to stop, even if stopping is difficult. However, when abuse goes unchecked, it hijacks the brain's chemistry. It crosses a dangerous threshold into drug addiction, clinically known as substance use disorder. At this point, it is no longer a choice. It's a chronic, relapsing brain disease. And lies the reward pathway, which relies on a chemical messenger called dopamine. You might have heard of it. It is designed to release all forms of dopamine when it is essential for surviving, such as eating or spending time with our loved ones. Addictive substances violently hijack the system, flooding the brain with artificial dopamine at levels up to 10 times higher than the natural reward. Over time, the brain adapts by shutting down its own dopamine production. The result is terrifying. The individual loses the joy of normal life. The brain is wired to believe that the drug is vital for its survival. Now, moving towards it's simple because this transformation happens silently a train ourselves to recognize warning signs that it shows. Addiction is a master in this slide, but it leaves distinct footprints across three categories: physical, behavioral, and psychological. Let us look into it. Physically, there is certain drastic changes such as rapid weight loss or gain, bloodshot eyes, abnormally dilated or pinpoint pupils, or a sudden severe neglect of personal hygiene. Unexplained shakes, unpaved or completely disrupted sleep cycle. Whereas individuals is awake for days or sleep for unnaturally long periods. These are the major red flags. Behavior prominent symptom is isolation and secrecy. Individuals struggling with addiction will abruptly drop their long-term gain for a completely new, unexplained social circle. They become intensely guarded about their whereabouts, their phones, and their private spaces. You will see a sudden decline in responsibilities, such as poor grades, unexplained absence from work, or completely abandoning hobbies they used to love. Financially, there's almost always a strain. They may face unexplained financial crisis as funding the habit becomes an expensive daily necessity for them. Psychologically, the emotional volatility is immense. You might observe sudden, unpredictable mood swings, shifting from extreme artificial euphoria to deep irritability, hostility, or intense paranoia within a matter of seconds. Anxiety, lack of motivation, and a persistent heavy cloud of depression becomes the norm. Now, when we see these symptoms, the natural question to ask is why? How does someone fall into this trap? Medical science tells us that addiction is incredibly complex. No one wakes up intending to destroy their life. Instead, it is usually a perfect storm of three major vulnerable factors. First are the biological and genetic factors. Some people are simply born more vulnerable to dependency. Extensive clinical research shows that genetic account for roughly 40 to 60% of persons vulnerable to substance use disorders. Second are psychological factors, often referred to as self-medicating. A vast majority of individuals who fall into addiction are trying to escape an underlying untreated mental health struggle. Third are environmental and social factors. For young adults and students, peer pressure is an incredibly potent catalyst. The consequences of that step, however, are devastatingly widespread. On the individual, the physical toll is brutal. It causes irreversible damage to internal organs, leading to liver failure, cardiovascular diseases, compromised immune systems, and permanent cognitive impairment. Mentally, it generates severe psychiatric disorders. But addiction is a disease of proximity. It destroys everyone standing close to it. It fractures families, demolishing trust, draining life savings, and creating environments of deep emotional trauma. On a macro level, it drains our national, nation's economic productivity, strains our healthcare system, and robs society of its most valuable asset, that is, the potential of our youth. Yet, as grim as this reality sounds, the most critical message is one of profound hope. Addiction is highly treatable. It is a medical condition that requires a clinical response, not a moral failure that deserves social stigma. The path of rehabilitation is a structured, multi step healthcare journey. It begins with medical detox. This is the process of safely clearing the toxic substance from a person's body under strict medical supervision, ensuring that dangerous withdrawal symptoms are managed safely and humanely. But detox only cleans the body. Therapy heals the mind. Behavioral therapies are essential as they help individuals uncover why they turn to drugs. healthy coping mechanisms to handle life stress and guide them in rebuilding their cognitive function. To dive deeper into today's webinar, let us carry this medical understanding with us. Let us remember that behind every statistic of drug abuse is a human life, a hijacked brain, and a family seeking a way out. By understanding the signs of addiction, we can replace judgment with treatment and shame with support. Vishesh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kritika. Now it is my privilege and honor to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker for today's session. We are honored to have with us Dr. Kumar Askand Pandey, sir, Associate Professor at Dr. Ram Manohar Lohiya, National Law University, Lucknow. Sir is well-known academician and an expert in criminal law and criminal justice administration. Over the year, he has contributed extensively to legal education, research, training programs, academic writing in the field of criminal law. He has also been involved in national level sensitization programs for law enforcement agencies. His expertise will help us to understand this issue from legal, social, and preventive perspective. It is privileged to have you with us, sir. Now, I request you to kindly address the gathering. Sir, please. Sorry, sir, you are not audible.
All right. Thank you, Vishesh. Thank you for introducing me, and good evening, one and all. It's indeed a privilege to interact, if that is possible, of course, uh, with such a vibrant gathering of young legal minds. Initially, I thought that there would be only students or associates of the Pro Bono Club, or the students who are pursuing their 3-year or 5-year LLB program at Lucknow University. But right from the very beginning, the chat box, I saw that people right from Goa to Gurugram, those who are in the legal profession and also in academia, they are also part of this gathering. So I take this opportunity to thank the organizers, Professor Alok, under whose leadership the Pro Bono Club Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow, has invited me to speak on an issue that lies at the intersection of criminal law, constitutional governance, public health, human rights, and last but not the least, social responsibility. So the problem of drug abuse and drug trafficking in India is going to be today's thrust area. On this International Day Against Drug Abuse that we observe globally on June 26. So before I formally begin with my discourse, I would just, it's just a poser. Many of you personally know someone who has experimented with drugs. There is no doubt that it's something that has become an endemic problem inside the campus of the education institutions, outside the campuses, everywhere. But you must have also thought of what comes first, the crime or the addiction. There is great nexus between crime and addiction. Most of you would realize addiction often precedes criminal behavior. This is something that most of you, almost every one of you, must realize. At the first glance, in fact, this may appear to be a topic that is confined to criminal law or police administration, law enforcement. But today's discussion is not merely about criminals. It's about law, it's about public health, it's about constitutional rights, it's also about policing. It's about rehabilitation. And also your role as a future legal professionals. I'm addressing the young legal minds who are still in the developmental stage of their career, those who are still in the law school or have just graduated and are into legal practice. So many people associate drug-related offenses solely with the arrest of traffickers, seizure of narcotics, prosecution under the principal law. Everyone is aware that Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, which we commonly call NDPS Act. There is another lesser known that also touches upon various aspects of drugs, not necessarily narcotic drugs, of course, titled that Cosmetics and Drugs Act of 1940, Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940, that is the precise title. But a deeper examination reveals that drug abuse is not merely a legal problem. It's not. It is simultaneously a public health issue, a public health crisis. It's a mental health issue. It's a family issue. It's an educational issue. It's an economic issue as well. And above all, it's a societal issue. As future lawyers, judges, prosecutors, policymakers, legal scholars, you will be required not only to interpret statutes, but also to understand the human realities that lie behind legal disputes. The effectiveness of law depends not only upon the severity of punishment. You know that NDPS Act is notorious for the severity of punishment. That would once again be highlighted when I'll be talking about the legal dynamics. So the effectiveness of any law, as I said, is not measured by merely severity of punishment, but also by the fairness of its enforcement. Fairness, not only strictness with which it is enforced, but also how fairly it is enforced. The compassion of its institutions, the resilience of the society that it seeks to protect. And that is why I would like you to approach this subject not only as a student of law, but also as an enlightened, responsible citizen of this country. So there are a lot of questions that you need to ask. And I believe that when the topic was being introduced by one of the associates of the Pro Bono Club, you must have found answers to many questions. Why do young people begin experimenting with drugs? Is every person who is found in possession of narcotic substances, drugs that we commonly call, necessarily a hardened criminal? Can imprisonment alone eradicate drug abuse? Can punishment alone address this menace in the society? Should society treat addiction merely as a crime? Or should it also regard it as a medical condition requiring treatment and rehabilitation? But then, as simple as these questions appear, they don't have simple answers. So throughout today's discussion, I hope each one of you will strive to arrive at your own informed conclusions. We know that the United Nations has repeatedly observed that illicit drug trafficking is among the world's most profitable organized criminal activities. Trafficking in drugs, trafficking in illicit arms, trafficking in humans. These are three most profitable organized criminal activities. It generates enormous illicit wealth. That wealth that it generates is often used in financing other organized crimes, including terrorism in certain regions. It also contributes to corruption, destroys families, and undermines public health. India occupies a unique geographical position. Now, this is something that we need to carefully ponder over. That to our west lies the Golden Crescent, comprising regions of Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan, historically known for opium production. To our east lies the Golden Triangle. These terms and phrases, Golden Crescent and Golden Triangle, almost every one of you must be aware that these are phrases that are often used to refer to the most notorious, infamous routes of drug trafficking. So in our east is the Golden Triangle, including Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, another region that is associated with illicit narcotics and drugs. And it is this geographical location that makes India more vulnerable, not only as a destination market, but also as a transit route for international drug trafficking. And despite this, the most discerning aspect is not only merely cross-border trafficking. Increasingly, drug abuse is affecting school students, college students, young professionals, adolescents. Everyone. Synthetic drugs, misuse of prescription medicines, online drug markets, encrypted communication platforms. All these combined together, they have transformed the nature of the problem. And this is why legal awareness has become an important aspect, as important as legal enforcement is. But then we need to understand a few terms which are often misunderstood or not properly understood, or even if understood, they are not understood in the proper perspective. A word as simple as drug is often misunderstood. In common language, people use the term to refer only to illegal substances. But legally and medically, the term has a much wider meaning. A drug may simply be a medicine used for certain cures, for certain ailments, for certain diseases. Antibiotics, painkillers, insulin and vaccines are all drugs. The problem arises when certain substances possess psychoactive properties, psychotropic properties. That is, they affect the functioning of the brain and nervous system and are consumed for non-medical purposes or in violation of law. Some substances have legitimate medical uses but are tightly regulated. You must have heard that a certain medicine, you must have experienced that a certain medicine can't be procured, can't be bought without a medical prescription by a qualified medical practitioner. So the use of those medicines or drugs is legitimate, but are highly regulated, tightly regulated. The reason is that they can cause dependence. Others have almost no recognized therapeutic value and are prohibited except for scientific research. Therefore, every illegal narcotic is a drug, but every drug is not illegal. This distinction is extremely important for lawyers because the NDPS Act does not prohibit all drugs. It regulates and prohibits specific narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and controlled substances under defined circumstances. Similarly, we need to understand what psychoactive or psychotropic substances. Psychoactive or psychotropic substances affect the central nervous system. So depending upon their chemical nature, they may produce relaxation, euphoria, hallucination, increased alertness, reduced pain, altered perception, or even sedation. Common examples are heroin, cocaine, cannabis, opium, morphine, LSD, even prescription opioids. America, the United States of America is under the grip of this opioid abuse that has turned into an endemic health crisis. Certain sedatives also fall in the, certain tranquilizers also fall in the same category when misused. Each of these substances acts differently upon the brain, but repeated exposure often produces common outcome. That common outcome is dependence, that we call addiction. Then what is substance abuse? Occasional medical use under professional supervision is entirely different from substance abuse. Because substance abuse refers to the harmful or hazardous use of psychoactive substances leading to physical, psychological, behavioral, or social impairment. This was even in the earlier brief introductory remarks. This was emphasized that initially an individual may consume drugs voluntarily. Over time, repeated exposure changes the brain's reward pathways. The person no longer consumes drugs to feel pleasure. It's no longer just for pleasure. Eventually, the person consumes drugs simply to feel normal. That pleasure is gone now. The struggle is to feel normal. Once that drug makes you dependent or the person becomes addicted. This progression from experimentation to dependence is gradual, and often imperceptible. That is why prevention is easier than treatment. Then, a very brief take on why young people begin using drugs. This is perhaps the most important question. This again was touched in the previous brief discussion. The ample evidence available demonstrating that addiction rarely begins with a deliberate intention to become addicted. No one wants to be an addict. When one first experiments, one doesn't want to get addicted. It usually develops through a combination of personal vulnerabilities and maybe environmental influences. So among young people, several factors are commonly available. They commonly contribute, including curiosity. Adolescence and early adulthood are periods of exploration. These young people experiment simply because they wish to experience something new. But unfortunately, what begins as experimentation sometimes develops into dependence. Peer pressure, that's one of the most crucial factors. The desire to belong is a powerful psychological force. That I want to belong to a group that I find very happening. But the group is in substance abuse. So how do I belong? I belong to that group only when I also act the way they do. So that fear of social exclusion, the lopsided idea or the wish to appear confident, mature, or adventurous is something that often drives young people, impressionable minds, into this vicious circle of drug abuse. And what is important in this regard is that sometimes the greatest pressure comes not from direct coercion. That's very rare that one is directly coerced, pressurized, threatened. But that greatest pressure comes from silent conformity. That is, academic stress is one reason, mental health challenges may be one, family environment may be another, children growing up amidst violence, neglect, substance abuse, when they see elders in the family, the older siblings, parents using these drugs, children who are emotionally unstable, they may be more susceptible. They are, in fact. That's why family support remains one of the strongest protective factors against addiction. And last but not the least, easy availability. Earlier generations, even our generation, it associated drugs with secret criminal networks. Today, the landscape has changed. Synthetic drugs, misuse of prescription medicines, online platforms, encrypted messaging applications, even home delivery mechanisms have increased accessibility in many urban centers. Technology has unfortunately become a facilitator for drug trafficking. As mentioned, that addiction doesn't occur overnight. it usually progresses through identifiable stages. The first stage is experimentation. This is followed by occasional recreational use. Gradually, the frequency increases, leading to regular use. The individual then develops dependence, where physical or psychological discomfort arises in the absence of the substance. You must have heard that those who are addicts, if they are deprived of that certain dose that they are habitual to, they develop withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms may include excessive sweating, pain, breathlessness. There may be many other physical symptoms associated with what we call the withdrawal symptom. Finally, the addiction becomes compulsive, with drug-seeking behavior dominating the person's life despite severe adverse consequences. Understanding this is important. This progression is important because intervention is most successful during the early stages. It's not that those who are in severe drug abuse can't be rehabilitated, but certainly it's comparatively more difficult, protracted, prolonged process. So what are the early warning stages? What are the early warning signs of addiction? That is very important. Recognizing early signs is very important because this can save lives. So the physical signs mentioned in the earlier session as well, persistent red eyes, for example, unexplained weight loss, poor personal hygiene, tremors, excessive sleepiness, unusual hyperactivity. These are two diametrically opposite. A person is either sleeping all the day, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day, or is unusually hyperactive most of the time. But then there are behavioral changes as well. Academic performance declines. He would not go regularly to the classes. He would always be in financial crunch, would keep his things secret, would not even be mingling with friends who are different in the sense that who don't belong to the group. Sudden change in social circles. He would be neglecting responsibilities. Then there are psychological symptoms as well. Mood swings, irritability, anxiety, depression, impaired concentration, aggression, social withdrawal. One symptom alone proves nothing. We all have experienced anxiety at times. We became aggressive. At times, we did not feel like going to social gatherings, even with parents and friends and siblings. But every system alone, every symptom alone is not something that would prove anything. Multiple warning signs occurring together should be identified and should encourage timely intervention rather than the judgment. The health consequences of substance abuse are enormous. They affect liver, they impair memory, judgment, cognitive functioning. Certain drugs increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, Injectable drugs are often responsible for the spread of HIV, hepatitis through needle sharing. Overdose can result in respiratory failure, even death. Equally serious are but psychiatric consequences as well. Anxiety disorders, depression, psychosis, suicidal tendencies, severe personality changes. These are social consequences are also enormous, as we know. And these social consequences extend far beyond the individual. Families suffer emotional trauma. Parents experience guilt and helplessness. If the abuser is married with children, children lose stable caregivers. Education institutions also get affected. They witness declining academic performance. Employers face reduced productivity. Communities experience increased violence, theft, and organized crime. Addiction imposes enormous social and economic cost upon the nation. But then crime and addiction has a complex relationship. That is something that we should understand and explore. Therefore, it's important that we avoid simplistic assumptions. Simplistic assumptions must be avoided. Not every person suffering from addiction becomes involved in crime. Similarly, not every person prosecuted under the NDPS Act is an addict. There are important distinctions. And the law, as you know, recognizes offenses committed by traffickers, manufacturers, financiers, transporters, organized criminal syndicates, and consumers. The motivations, culpability, and societal risk associated with each category, they differ significantly. This distinction becomes particularly important when we discuss punishment and rehabilitation under the NDPS Act. Now, let me illustrate. Imagine a 19-year-old university student. He attends a birthday party where friends persuade him to experiment with a prohibited substance. Initially, he refuses. That is normally what happens in every case. Eventually, he agrees. Months later, he begins consuming regularly. All those issues that I discussed would be the consequence. Academic performance would decline. He would start borrowing money. His relationships would deteriorate. His family would notice behavioral changes, but may mistake that as something such as examination related stress and all. And one day, police recovers a prohibited substance from his possession. Ask yourself, at what stage should society have intervened? At the moment of arrest? Or months earlier when early warning signs first appeared? Law alone can't answer these questions. Families, educational institutions, healthcare professionals, communities, and peers all have responsibilities. And it's precisely for this reason prevention remains the most effective strategy. Now, having understood the human dimension of addiction, let's now turn to the legal dimension. So the law dealing with narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances has three important objectives. First, it seeks to prevent illicit trafficking. That is the first objective. Second, it aims to punish organized criminal activity. And third, it seeks to protect society while facilitating treatment and rehabilitation where it is appropriate. And the challenge lies in balancing these activities, punishing, protecting the society, and preventing illicit trafficking. And all these three objectives must be balanced without compromising constitutional guarantees, procedural fairness, or what we call human dignity. And this balance, to a certain extent, I won't say that to the fullest, is embodied in the NDPS Act of 1985. And this is the legislation that we shall now examine in brief. For a student of law, the NDPS Act is much more than another penal statute. It is one of the most stringent criminal laws in our legal system. It departs in several respects from ordinary principles of criminal jurisprudence. It imposes severe punishments, restricts the grant of bail, incorporates statutory presumptions and reverse onus clauses, and places extraordinary responsibilities upon investigating agencies. And because of these features, courts have repeatedly emphasized that strict compliance with procedural safeguards is indispensable. But before we look into the Act briefly, it's useful to appreciate its constitutional and international foundations, the constitutional perspective. This is something that every one of you is aware of. The Constitutional Amendment does not expressly refer to narcotic drugs, but several constitutional provisions shape India's legal response against drug trafficking, drug abuse, and protection of public health. The first is Article 47, which is part of the DPSP. It casts a duty upon the state to improve public health, and in particular to endeavor to prohibit the consumption of intoxicating drinks and drugs that are injurious to health except for medicinal purposes. This NDPS Act reflects the constitutional commitment that is embodied in Article 47. Equally important is Article 21, which guarantees that no person shall be deprived of life or personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. This guarantee has profound implication. As we know that the NDPS Act prescribes severe punishments and imposes stringent restrictions on personal liberty. The procedural safeguards contained in the NDPS Act must be scrupulously observed. The Supreme Court has consistently held that the greater the severity of punishment, the greater is the obligation to ensure fairness in investigation and trial. Now, India's drug laws are also influenced by international conventions aimed at combating illicit trafficking while ensuring the availability of controlled substances for legitimate medical and scientific purposes. These conventions encouraged countries, including India, to harmonize their domestic laws against drug trafficking and contributed significantly to the enactment of the NDPS Act in 1985. To name three such conventions, the first one is Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961, as amended by the 1972 Protocol. Second one is Convention on Psychotropic Substance, 1971. And the most important is, interestingly, a convention that came almost 3 years after the enactment of NDPS Act, is the United Nations Convention Against Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances of 1988. So prior to 1985, India had several fragmented laws such as Opium Act of 1857, even older than the IPC of 1860. Then another Opium Act of 1878 was enacted, and a third one was the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1930. If you read the scheme of NDPS Act of 1985, the repeals and savings clause of the NDPS Act mentions these three legislations: the Opium Act of 1857, 1878, and Dangerous Drugs Act of 1930, that have now been repealed and replaced by one singular legislation, that is the NDPS Act. This act has undergone several amendments reflecting changing patterns of trafficking, evolving international obligations. I already told you that the most important international instrument dealing with global menace of drug trafficking is that convention of 1988. So that also necessitated changes and amendments into this 1985 legislation, that is the NDPS Act, and also increasing emphasis on rehabilitation and treatment. That also has led to changes since 1985. There are many important definitions. For example, the definition of narcotic drug, the definition of psychotropic substance, the definition of controlled substance. What is illicit traffic? Illicit traffic, this expression extends beyond mere possession. It includes production. For a layman, illicit traffic would mean conveying something from one place to another. But the definition of illicit traffic in the NDPS Act includes production, manufacture, of course, transportation, but also includes warehousing, financing, and several connected activities. This broad definition enables law enforcement agencies to target entire criminal networks rather than merely individual consumers. Now, another very important concept, legal concept under the NDPS Act, or for that matter, under the possession laws, where possession has been made punishable. It may be possession of illicit drugs, it may be possession of illicit arms and ammunition, it may be possession of, say, pornographic material. The concept is known as the concept of conscious possession. This conscious possession is one of the most frequently litigated issues under the NDPS Act. We often assume that recovery of prohibited substance automatically establishes guilt. That's not the truth. The law is more nuanced. Possession under the NDPS Act generally requires what courts describe as a conscious possession. This means not merely physical custody, but also knowledge and control over the substance. Physical custody plus knowledge plus control over that substance. So a passenger, for example, unknowingly carrying another person's bag containing narcotic substance. Is he in conscious possession? The answer depends upon the evidence that would be available on record. So major offenses under the NDPS Act, they include cultivation of prohibited plants like opium, production and manufacture, possession, purchase and sale, transport, import and export, consumption, of course, even private consumption, personal consumption, financing illicit traffic, harboring offenders, conspiracy, abetment, attempt to commit offenses, of course. These are. Unlike ordinary criminal statutes that focus primarily upon completed offenses, the NDPS Act also addresses preparatory and supporting activity. Attempt, abetment, conspiracy would no doubt be punishable. But NDPS also extends its tentacles to preparatory and supporting activities in certain circumstances, in certain situations. One of the most significant features of the Act is that punishment depends largely upon the quantity involved. Because the law distinguishes between small quantity, quantity lesser than commercial but greater than a small, and commercial quantity. And this classification only reflects the principle of proportionality. As a future lawyer, you need not memorize the numerical threshold for every substance, which is different for different substance. So what would be the small quantity for ganja may not be the small quantity for some other narcotic drug or psychotropic substance. As a lawyer, you should be aware of this, that quantity matters. But what is the threshold is something that you can always refer to in the latest their provision of the NDPS Act. As already mentioned, that NDPS Act prescribes some of the harshest punishments found in Indian criminal law. For offences involving commercial quantities, punishments may extend to rigorous imprisonment for 20 years or even to life imprisonment. Repeat offenders may even face death penalty. For example, if you refer to section 31 capital A that was subsequently added, it prescribes death penalty for certain offences after previous conviction. That someone who has already been punished for a certain offence under the NDPS Act has once again found guilty. Section 31 capital A prescribes death penalty. So on the one hand, severity of punishment reflects Parliament's intention to combat organized trafficking through deterrence. But deterrence alone can't justify procedural unfairness. And that brings us to one of the most important aspects of the Act. That is procedural safeguards. We are often surprised to learn that several NDPS prosecutions fail. And we are even more surprised when we find that the prosecution failed not because drugs were absent, that there was no drug recovered, or what was recovered was not a drug. After forensic examination, it was found to be some innocuous, harmless substance. But because mandatory legal safeguards were ignored, now that is something very interesting. This underscores a very fundamental principle of criminal justice. The rule of law doesn't permit conviction at any cost. And the investigation itself must comply with the law. So there are procedural safeguards and stringent measures that must be put in place as far as search and seizure is concerned. And when you scan through the NDPS Act, you would find that the Act contains detailed provisions regarding authorization, search of premises, personal search, recording of information, seizure, sampling, preservation of evidence. The purpose is not to create technical obstacles for investigators. The object is to ensure reliability of evidence and protect people from arbitrary action. And procedure does matter. Procedural fairness, as we know, that has been held to be part of constitutional scheme, constitutional principle. And if the procedure is not fair, certainly that results in violation of a fundamental right. Then, in another marked departure from the ordinary criminal jurisprudence, the NDPS Act has reverse burden in statutory presumptions. Ordinarily, we know that the prosecution bears the burden of proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt. But under certain specified provisions of the NDPS Act, once foundational facts are established, certain presumptions may arise regarding culpable mental state or possession. These presumptions are rebutable, but often the defense finds it very difficult to rebut these reverse presumptions. Similarly, bail under the NDPS Act is governed by an entirely different jurisprudence that applies to normal bail proceedings. Unlike the general principles contained in Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Samhita or earlier under the CRPC, the NDPS Act, it prescribes exceptionally stringent conditions for granting bail in cases involving commercial quantities. For example, the court must be satisfied, amongst other things, that there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accused is not guilty and is unlikely to commit any offense while on bail. These conditions make the grant of bail significantly more difficult than in ordinary, again, criminal cases. And this reflects the legislative concern regarding organized trafficking. But at the same time, courts continue to emphasize that these provisions must be interpreted consistently with constitutional guarantees of fairness and personal liberty. So I would be very briefly mentioning four landmark decisions delivered by the Supreme Court in the past 25, 26 years that have shaped the narcotic drugs jurisprudence, if I may use that phrase, in India. The first one is a 1999 decision, State of Punjab versus Baldev Singh. This judgment underscored the importance of procedural safeguards to the extent that the Supreme Court said that a person who was searched in violation of a certain provision, that is section 50 of the NDPS Act, even if that search yielded positive results, meaning thereby some drugs were recovered through that search, still the person would be entitled to acquittal, is what the Supreme Court said, that these procedural safeguards are not mere legislative formalities. They have to be strictly and stringently observed. The court emphasized that the statutory protection are not empty formalities. but essential guarantees against arbitrary action. The second one is a 2020 decision, Tufan Singh versus State of Tamil Nadu. This decision fundamentally altered the NDPS jurisprudence. The question was, as we know, that earlier Section 25 of the Indian Evidence Act, and now Section 23, Clause 1 of the Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam, it says that confession to a police officer can't be proved. And the NDPS Act, under certain provisions, confers power of in charge of police station for the purpose of investigation on certain other officers of, say, for example, narcotics department. So whether confessions made to those officers who have been conferred with the power of a police officer for the purpose of investigation would also be hit by Section 25 earlier or not was the question under consideration for several years. And finally, Tufan Singh versus State of Tamil Nadu in 2020 held that officers empowered under the NDPS Act who investigate offences are police officers for the purpose of exclusionary rule relating to confessions. The consequence is that the confessional statements made to such officers are not admissible as substantive evidence against the accused person. Then there is this 2018 judgment, Mohanlal versus State of Punjab, again highlighted the concerns arising when the complainant and the investigating officers are the same person. And then another important decision was delivered by the Supreme Court in 2008 in Noor Agha versus State of Punjab, where again the Supreme Court said that though reverse burden clauses are not per se unconstitutional, but certainly even when the accused has to defend himself, that should be a fair sort of chance. There should be fair chance given to him to adduce evidence, and that presumption of guilt is a rebutable presumption. Now, these are few sort of legal issues that I wanted you to sort of understand. In fact, the modern drug trafficking resembles a multinational business. The problem is it's an enterprise. It has financiers, manufacturers, transporters, distributors, retailers, money launderers, corrupt facilitators, cyber specialists, local street peddlers, where each perform a specific role. And unless and until you understand the drug supply chain, you won't be able to understand the difficulty, or rather the depth of difficulty that the law enforcement agencies often face. And combating drug trafficking network is not possible for any agency acting solely, meaning thereby in silos. There has to be a concerted effort. The police, the prosecutor, other law enforcement agencies, forensic science experts, for example, because forensic science is often a silent witness in many NDPS prosecutions. Because the laboratory determines the nature of the substance, its purity, whether it falls within the statutory definition, whether the seized material corresponds to the samples examined. These are important issues that are often taken up by the court. Now, the last but not the least, can law alone solve the problem? Suppose the parliament amends the NDPS Act and doubles every punishment. Will that make drug abuse disappear? Almost certainly not. History demonstrates that criminal law is essential but insufficient. Law alone can't be sufficient. The law can reduce supply. It can't eliminate demand by itself. Demand reduction requires education, mental health services, family support, community participation, employment opportunities, counseling, rehabilitation. And the criminal justice system is only one part of much larger social response. So one of the most difficult questions is in drug policy is whether addiction should be viewed primarily as a crime or as a disease. The answer is that it may involve both, depending upon the facts. So we need to sort of ponder over, we need to understand what does rehabilitation mean, because rehabilitation is much more than mere what we call detox. It is a structured process through which an individual is assisted in recovering physical health, psychological stability, social relationships, and productive participation. And in ensuring this, institutions and organizations such as legal aid societies and pro bono clubs, they can play an important role. With this, I end my discourse today, and if the questions, comments, interventions, I would be happy to sort of respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful and thought-provoking session. Your address has helped us to understand this issue in much clearer and deeper way. Now we shall move towards the question and answer session. Participants who wish to ask any questions, they may raise their hands or post their questions in the chat box. I request everyone to keep their questions brief and relevant to the topics. Yes, Vishwin.
There are a couple of questions in the comment box.
Uh, Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, as you said that this drug problem is more often a societal problem than a legal problem. So, sir, what will help to prevent this? You can say illicit drug problem. Stricter, you can say law or awareness program, sir, in the society.
I probably see when we, in fact, think of this menace, we have to look at this menace from different angles and different perspectives. Someone who consumes or one who is an addict is not necessarily a drug trafficker. He is only concerned with that whether he would be getting the next dose or not. I told you that social exclusion is one of the biggest consequences, one of the gravest consequences. The person would be sort of living in the society but detached and withdrawn from the society. So his concern is only to ensure that whether he is going to get the next dose as and when required or not. But someone who is into drug trafficking,
Yes, sir.
that person has to be viewed differently. As far as NDPS is concerned, NDPS views both the user and trafficker as an offender. जो ड्रग ले रहा है वो भी अपराधी है, जो ड्रग बेच रहा है वो भी अपराधी है. लेकिन जो सोसाइटल रिस्पॉन्स है वो दोनों के लिए अलग अलग अगर नहीं होगा, then I don't think that this problem of drug abuse can ever be addressed. You can't keep all the drug abusers inside the prison forever. Drug traffickers deserve to be behind the bars. Drug traffickers should be kept incarcerated. But our concern is today that how to prevent drug abuse. Now that prevention of drug abuse can't be achieved by merely making the legal response more stringent unless and until the society also views that as a disease where compassion. That's why Government of India has started a lot of, I think, initiatives aimed at these addicts or those who are dependent on these psychotropic drugs and narcotic substances. तो कोई easy solution नहीं है, लेकिन निश्चित तौर पर awareness, sensitization and such programs which should be organized at a regular interval, not as a bare or mere formality. That is something that would certainly have some positive impact.
Yes, okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, there is one question in our comment box as Vidyasagar sir has asked. Even though hardship punishment in NDPS, still foreign nationals involved in drug business in India is prevailing. How can we prevent this?
This is very interesting. In fact, often इसका जवाब एक महाभारत में एक प्रसंग है. महाभारत में प्रसंग ये है कि यक्ष प्रश्न, ये शब्द आपने सुना होगा, महाभारत के संदर्भ में आता है. तो युधिष्ठिर से यक्ष ने यह पूछा था जब युधिष्ठिर के बाकी भाई जो है वो मूर्छित थे और उसने ये कहा था कि तुम मेरे प्रश्नों के उत्तर दोगे तो मैं इन्हें वापस चेतन अवस्था में ले आऊंगा, कि विश्व का सबसे बड़ा आश्चर्य क्या है. तो युधिष्ठिर ने ये उत्तर दिया था कि हम प्रतिदिन अपने आसपास लोगों की मृत्यु होते हुए देखते हैं, लेकिन ये समझते हैं कि हम अमर हैं. ये प्रश्न तो महत्वपूर्ण है, लेकिन इसका ये जो उत्तर है ये इतना ही नहीं है जितना दिखता है. ये बहुत गूढ़ है. प्रत्येक अपराधी अपने आप को अपने पूर्ववर्ती अपराधी से ज्यादा चालाक समझता है. उसको ये लगता है कि वो पकड़े गए थे, मैं नहीं पकड़ा जाऊंगा. और कहीं ना कहीं ये जो मानव मस्तिष्क की ये आकांक्षा होती है या ये भावना होती है कि वो पकड़ा नहीं जाएगा क्योंकि वो ज्यादा स्मार्ट है, जबकि वो देख रहा है कि ऐसे कार्यों में लिप्त लोग पकड़े जा रहे हैं. शायद वो एक बहुत बड़ी वजह है. दूसरी जो वजह है वो ये है कि मैं आपको बताऊं, बहुत सारी चीजें इस पर भी निर्भर करती हैं कि जो विदेशी है वो किस देश से है. क्या उस देश से भारतवर्ष के जो राजनीतिक संबंध हैं, आर्थिक संबंध हैं, वो अच्छे हैं, बेहतर हैं. क्योंकि जब भी कोई विदेशी यहाँ पर गिरफ्तार होता है तो उसमें सबसे पहले उसकी एम्बेसी को सूचना दी जाती है और वो एक्टिव होते हैं, उनका पूरा तंत्र एक्टिव होता है। तो निश्चित तौर पर इस समस्या का कोई रेडीमेड समाधान तो मेरे पास नहीं है। आप प्रो बोनो क्लब के सदस्य एसोसिएट्स लखनऊ जिला जेल का भ्रमण करने जाते होंगे तो वहां पर भी उनको ऐसे विदेशी बहुत सारे मिलते हैं जो ड्रग ट्रैफिकिंग के मामलों में जेल में बंद हैं और बड़े कॉन्फिडेंट है वो वहां पर। वो कहते हैं कि हमारी एम्बेसी जो है वो हमारा इंतजाम कर रही है, उनको बेस्ट लॉयर्स मिलेंगे, उनका कुछ जो है वो खर्च भी नहीं होगा, एम्बेसी उनको दिलाती है। होता है बहुत सारा, मुझे लगता है कि बहुत सारे कारण हैं। दूसरा है कि सामाजिक और आर्थिक परिस्थितियां जो हैं वो व्यक्ति को कभी कभी ज्यादा रिस्क लेने के लिए प्रेरित करती है। उनको लगता है कि अगर एक सिंगल ट्रांजैक्शन उनका जो है वो सफल हो गया तो शायद उनकी जिंदगी थोड़ा बेहतर हो जाएगी आर्थिक रूप से। तो गरीब देशों के लोग, यहाँ तक कि अभी कुछ दिनों पहले टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया में एक खबर थी कि किस प्रकार से भारत के युवाओं को कैरियर की तरह से जो है वो प्रयोग किया जा रहा है। जो बेरोजगार युवा हैं उनको 15,000 रुपए का केवल लालच दे करके कैसे उनको प्रयोग किया जा रहा है। तो उनको ये लगता है कि भाई रिस्क ले ही लेते हैं, 15,000 रुपए उनके लिए बड़ी रकम है, रिस्क ले लेते हैं, अगर सफल हो गए तो 15,000 रुपए मिल जाएंगे और अगर असफल हो गए तो ये ऐसे क्राइम सिंडिकेट ये भी बताते हैं कि अगर तुम पकड़े जाओगे तो हम तुम्हारी कानूनी सहायता भी करेंगे। तो बहुत सारे मल्टीपल फैक्टर्स हैं which contribute to this drug trafficking cartel, if I may say so. Yeah. कोई एक सिंगल कारण मेरी समझ से नहीं है।
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, Miss Ridhima, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, sir. This is Ridhima Singh, a final year law student. Sir, recently I have read some research papers regarding parental drug abuse. So, sir, my question is that is there anything called parental drug abuse, and if it is existing, then it is a socio problem or a legal problem or a socio-legal problem?
No,
And
social, it's primarily what we call a legal problem is primarily a social problem. The problem is first encountered and experienced by the society. Then when the society is unable to rectify that malady, the state would intervene. When the society itself recognizes that it's facing this problem and starts finding a solution and succeeds in finding a solution, the state would not intervene. The best governed state is a state with the least number of laws. That would be the best governed state. तो जिस प्रॉब्लम की आप बात कर रही हैं, पेरेंटल ड्रग अब्यूज, I talked about very briefly that how children learn drug abuse by watching their parents using that. जो मॉरल इनहिबिशन है वो मॉरल इनहिबिशन बचपन से ही नहीं है। अब एक ऐसा बच्चा 18 साल के एक ऐसे बच्चे की कल्पना करिए जिसने अपने परिवार में किसी को कोई इंटॉक्सिकेंट यूज करते हुए नहीं देखा और वो अब हॉस्टल में जाता है, तो निश्चित तौर पर उसका जो मॉरल थ्रेशोल्ड है वो उस बच्चे से ज्यादा होगा जिसने बचपन से ही अपने माँ बाप को बहुत आराम से जो है वो अल्कोहल या दूसरे जो ड्रग्स हैं उनको यूज करते हुए देखा। उसको कभी नहीं ऐसा लगेगा कि ये कुछ गलत है। और ऐसे बच्चे को जिसने अपने परिवार में नहीं देखा है या उसको ये बताया गया है कि ये गलत है और तुमको नहीं करना है, निश्चित तौर पर उसके ड्रग अब्यूज के कुचक्र में पड़ने की संभावनाएं कम है। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा हूं कि वो कभी नहीं पढ़ सकता, या ऐसे परिवार का बच्चा जहां पर ड्रग्स कभी यूज नहीं किए गए या जिनके विरोध में उसको हमेशा शिक्षा दी गई, वो कभी कर नहीं सकता। लेकिन निश्चित तौर पर इसकी संभावनाएं कम है बनिस्बत उस बच्चे के जिसने बचपन से ही अपने पारिवारिक वातावरण में इनको बहुत फ्रीली उपयोग करते हुए देखा है। तो पेरेंटल ड्रग अब्यूज तो इनिशियली जो है वो सामाजिक समस्या ही है, लेकिन जब वो ड्रग अब्यूज का रूप धर लेगी तो उसका रिस्पॉन्स तो लीगली होना।
थैंक यू सर।
Sir, there is a question from Lalit Kumar sir. What timing must be identified in a drug taking person to make him convince easily to leave it?
Once combination of those physical and psychological signs appear, combination of, I said, मेरी आंख में अगर कोई, जिसको कहते हैं कि कोई फॉरेन ऑब्जेक्ट आ गया और मेरी आंख लाल हो गई, दैट इज वन साइन which often is a sign of drug abuse as well. But didn't I tell you that if a child, an adolescent, a young person exhibits multiple signs, 2-3 साइंस उसके हैं, अब तो कम्युनिकेशन इज द की। बात कीजिए, उससे बात करना, वो स्टेज है। ऐसा हो सकता है कि 2-3 साइंस भी दिख रहे हैं, उसके बावजूद ही इज नॉट इनटू दैट, ही हैज नॉट इवन एक्सपेरिमेंटेड, बट स्टिल दैट इज द स्टेज where the intervention should start. Now that would vary from person to person, from case to case of course. तो इसको हम इस तरीके से देखते हैं।
Sir, another question from Riya Singh. How can India balance strict enforcement under the NDPS Act with the need for rehabilitation and de-addiction of drug-dependent individuals?
इसके भी इनफैक्ट बहुत सारे आयाम हैं, बहुत सारे आयाम हैं कि इंडिया ऑलरेडी हैज ग्रेडेड पनिशमेंट्स है। मैंने बताया कि पर्सनल कंजम्पशन के लिए भी ड्रग्स लेना जो है वो, या पर्सनल कंजम्पशन के लिए पजेस करना भी, इसको नॉन कॉमर्शियल क्वांटिटी कहते हैं, उसके लिए भी पजेस करना एन ऑफेंस। नाउ दैट हैज बीन मेड एन ऑफेंस because the state still believes in what we call deterrent theory. वो deter करना चाहता है by instilling a fear of punishment, that even if you have non-commercial quantity in your possession for your personal consumption, we will punish you. Now that approach has its own utility because it's purely demand and supply chain. If there is no demand, there won't be any supply. डिमांड ही नहीं तो सप्लाई कहां होगा? डिमांड को कैसे कंट्रोल करना है? डर दिखा के। डर किस चीज का? कि अगर तुम्हारी जेब में पड़ा हुआ है तो हम तुमको पनिश करेंगे, भले तुम बेचते नहीं हो, भले तुम ट्रैफिकर नहीं हो, भले तुम जो है वो घर की छत पे जा करके या छुप करके कहीं पी लेते हो, वॉशरूम में जाके पी लेते हो या यूज कर लेते हो। But at the same time, when the state finds that the person is in the vicious circle, it's the state's responsibility to view that abuser not merely as a criminal, but as a person who is suffering from a disease for whom a cure should be. लेकिन अभी फिलहाल जो एनडीपीएस एक्ट का, जो मैं बताऊं, एनडीपीएस एक्ट का थ्रस्ट जो है वो प्रिवेंशन और पनिशमेंट पे है। एनडीपीएस एक्ट का थ्रस्ट प्रिवेंशन पनिशमेंट पे है। सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के इनिशिएटिव्स जो हैं वो प्रिवेंशन और रिहेबिलिटेशन पर है। प्रिवेंशन, अर्ली इंटरवेंशन से प्रिवेंशन, और रिहेबिलिटेशन पे तो है। ये बैलेंस्ड अप्रोच है on paper at least. Now the need is to execute that in the true spirit of the policy. पॉलिसी की जो ट्रू स्पिरिट है उसमें इसके एग्जीक्यूशन को इंश्योर करना है, बस इतना हम कर ले जाएंगे तो शायद काफी हद तक इस समस्या पर काबू पा सकेंगे.
Sir, the next question is from Varsha Dubey. If
I'll
mediation is
take another one because I had told someone who was coordinating with me that I have to end it by 6:30. It's already 6:45. So this is the last question that I'm going to take. I'm sorry, I can't take any more question. The last one, please.
Sir, by Varsha Dubey, if mediation is made compulsory in schools and colleges, can it help in reducing drug abuse?
Meditation.
Oh, sorry, meditation. Sorry.
Meditation, yeah.
So
All
can
right.
it help in reducing drug abuse among students?
Definitely. In fact, many studies have shown that of many reasons why people experiment with drugs. Why? One is that when they are overly anxious due to certain mental stress, certain problem in personal life that they are unable to cope with. So certainly meditation that calms your brain, that helps you relieve that stress, can help people in not getting initiated, and even if they have sort of started experimenting, getting rid of that certainly can help, no doubt about it. As I said that I'm sorry, I can't stay beyond this. So please.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, everyone, for your active participation. And also thank you, sir, for patiently addressing all the questions and sharing your valuable insight with us. I'm sure that today's discussion has helped all of us to gain a better understanding of the issue and our role in building a drug-free society. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Anjali ma'am, co-chairperson of Legal Aid Center, to deliver the vote of thanks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Vishesh, and good evening to all of you. As we draw the curtains on today's enlightening webinar, it is my distinct honor and privilege to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Legal Aid Center as well as on behalf of the Pro Bono Club, Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow. First and foremost, I extend my deepest gratitude to our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Kumar Askand Pandey, sir. Sir, your profound expertise, compelling clarity of thoughts, and engaging delivery have vastly enriched our understanding of the complexity which surrounds the drug abuse and addiction. Thank you for sparing your invaluable time to educate us and for inspiring us to step up as a responsible member of society. We owe our sincere gratitude to our respected head and dean, Faculty of Law, University of Lucknow, Professor Dr. R.K. Verma, sir. It is just because of his visionary leadership, constant engagement, and unwavering support, which that serves as the bedrock for all our academic and extension endeavors. I would like to express my thanks to Professor Dr. Alok Kumar Yadav, sir, faculty coordinator of Pro Bono Club, and Professor Dr. Abhishek Kumar Tiwari, sir, chairperson, Legal Aid Center, as it is their dedicated mentorship and its forward thinking, their vision, which actually and their commitment to promoting legal awareness, which actually made this meaningful dialogue possible today. A successful event is, as we know, is the result of many hands working together. So I take this moment to commend the entire organizing team for their meticulous planning, tireless effort, and seamless coordination. Equally, my heartfelt thanks go out to all our participants. Your enthusiastic presence and active engagements are what truly put life into today's session. Before we part our ways, let us carry forward the core message of today's webinar, which is is the foundation of awareness is the foundation of prevention. Drug abuse and addictions are not merely individual battles, but societal crisis, which demands collective action. So let us commit to begin catalyst for change, educating ourselves, supporting those who are in need, and working together towards a healthier, safer, and drug-free society. With this hopeful resolve, I once again thank our distinguished speaker, our respected dignitaries, and the organizing committee, and each one of you for making this webinar a resounding success. Thank you all for your gracious presence. Have a wonderful evening ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you
Pranam
very
sir,
much.
धन्यवाद.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind words. As we come to the end of today's session, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Kumar Askand sir, for sharing his time and addressing the session with such depth and clarity. I also thank Professor Dr. Alok Kumar Yadav sir, Professor Dr. Abhishek Tiwari sir, the fellow members of the organizing team for their efforts in making webinar possible, and all participants for joining and actively be part of this session. Let us remember that awareness is the very first step to a prevention and drug-free society, and can only be built through collective responsibility and consistent effort. Before concluding, I would like to share a few important points regarding certificates. All registered participants who have attended the webinar will receive e-certificates of participation. Any further updates or information regarding the certificates or related matters will be shared through our official website, official WhatsApp group or via email. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Stay aware, stay healthy, and stay responsible. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Vishesh.